the creature say care? How does the creature say life? God of the neighbor, God of the foe, God of the pruning hook. How does the creature say love? How does the creature say peace? God of the ages, God near at hand, God of the loving heart. How do your children say joy? How do your children say home? Carol's going to help us learn how to say peace and how to say woe and how to say home with her reflections. And so normally at this time we share a word from our ancient, holy, sacred texts. We read from the Hebrew scriptures, or we read from the Psalms or the Gospel or the epistles, but Carol has incorporated that into her time of reflection. And so I invite you not to fret, it will come. Carol, please join us.
One of the things that happened for me when I stepped out of the Christian culture as minister for a while was coming to learn about the creation texts that weren't brought forward in the last few centuries, and the mystics, the Christian mystics. And one of those Christian mystics had this wonderful saying called, God is the great underground river. And so to begin, I sang, river flow through me, take the stranger away. River flow through me, bring us communion today. What time is it? You know, this question has actually punctuated my life, all of our lives, really. It was that question that brought me into ministry when my mother died, and it was the question that took me out of ministry in the church for a while with the climate crisis. What time is it? It's the question that has brought women into ministry in the church. It's why the LGBT flag flies in our churches. It's why the Indigenous Medicine Wheel is part of the United Church of Canada crest now. What time is it? As Avery said, times are a-changing. So it was in 2004, in response to this global warming, that question led me out of the pulpit and into the woods. And I opened there a retreat center, and there I hosted priests and nuns, environmentalists, economists, scientists, Buddhists, Indigenous leaders and teachers. And in the rearview mirror, all I can say is that I was probably looking to answer that question, what do these times ask of me? What's the wisdom that I need to make it through these times? So that was about 2004. Well, it was around 2010, an invitation came to come back into some pulpit supply in a church nearby. And I let that invitation sit on my desk for a while. You know, I looked at it, it looked like a bathing suit that was maybe 3 sizes too small. I was afraid I really didn't fit anymore. And why would I fit? I'd learned a new language out there. I spoke a new language. Cosmology and allurements and seamlessness. Well, the more I thought about it, it's a different language. In the church, we would talk about stories instead of cosmology, and calling instead of allurements, and communion instead of seamlessness. So and who doesn't long to get back in the bathing suit, right? So I came back into that church, and we did some things together, an experiment in me bringing back what I had learned, and them feeding back to me how that fit in to the church. And when I went back, I saw things very differently. And I wanted to be back in a new way. I wanted to be there with you. And so we formed a circle, and we did that. And I looked at the people that I was meeting in church in a different way. I called them pewsters. Because I thought of them more, you know how jurors sit in a jury box to hear the interpretations of a situation and come to try to determine the truth. Well, I understood that the folks in the church in the pews now, the work in these times that are changing is to listen to the interpretations of the wisdom texts and to reflect on whether they're making relevant, compassionate connections to the reality of our times. Do they guide us today? And I also discovered when I was back that it wasn't going back, because those pewsters were allured to the same question that I was. What time is it? What is the world asking of us today? The experience led me to write Evolutionary Dancer, and here I am. So I'm here to ask you, what time is it? On this first slide, we can see the green global faith movement. These are signs and Christians of all and religious of all faiths, actually, who are marching in the streets right around the world these days because they know what time it is. It is time to spend our life on the very best of struggles. It's time for law, it's time for business, it's time for religions to recognize that we're living in end times, meaning the end of times as we knew it. It's time to shift the emphasis from peace and justice, meaning social justice, justice for people, to eco-justice. I mean, after all, what good does it really do to teach a woman to fish if the waters are contaminated? We are aware now in these times, as never before, that existence is seamless. Everything is intimately connected. The next slide, gosh, Avery brought it home as more beautifully than I could have imagined. This is the world's youth, and they don't need me to ask what time it is. They didn't need the United Nations to issue a red alert this summer. They are more aware of the seamlessness of existence than other generations. They know that the human, like other species, is a threatened species. And their own allurement to live a full and purposeful life draws them to march and strike and call the world leaders and you and me to lead. And they cause me to ask myself, they cause me to ask the church, what is our work today? On this next slide, you'll meet Thomas Berry. And the readers and the followers of this man agree it's time for a new story, a new cosmology, a new worldview, a new framework in which to see and understand what we're seeing. Cosmology. It's a shiny new word I learned. I like it. Cosmology is an important word for us to learn because it's the story a culture tells itself to explain and guide their journey. It's also a science, a sector of science, study of the strategies like allurements and studies of the nature of the cosmos like seamlessness. But anyway, this priest, Father Thomas Berry, a Passionist priest, he may well be the father of the new story of cosmology. And you know, he taught very close to Welland in 1979 to 2000 at Port Burwell. Is that familiar to people? In a center for ecology, the study of the earth, and spirituality. And his question was, what's the relationship between what we believe as theology and the ecological crisis? And his conclusion was, we're in trouble right now in the whole planet because we do not have a good story. We're in between stories. And the old story of how we fit into life is no longer effective. And if you look around us at the concerns of people threatened by climate change, we can't disagree. But let's ask ourselves how we would describe that old story. What's the old story that isn't working? Well, here's a clue on this next slide. It's a story that explains how 60% of life has gone extinct even since we first saw that amazing photograph of the Earth from space in 1967. So even though we knew we were one living being, this has still happened. Here's another clue about what's that old story that doesn't work. It's the story that says the economy is separate from ecology, from the earth. The human is separate from the animal or the plant or the ocean. And this is an important one for us. Divinity is separate from human and earth. We're catching on to the fact that that's not the story that works anymore, and so we're singing these amazing hymns and praying the words that connect it all. We're living in an important time of change. But what's the old story? It's the story of separation. So what time is it? It's a time that we're recognizing that the stories we believe are the stories we live. And the lives we have lived, now threaten the future of everything. So it's time to reject the story of separation. It's time for a new story. It was very exciting to me to discover that the church was born in just such times as the times we're living in. That blows my mind and opens my heart. For example, it's a time that the temple priests would have described as their culture is polluted. It's a time Matthew believed that were end times, and it's a time that some of the Jesus followers had found a new story. So let me tell you a story. It's from Matthew 14. It's one we usually read at the beginning of Advent. The story of the waiting bridesmaids and the tardy bridegroom. According to custom, the bridesmaids awaited the bridegroom's arrival. And after many hours of waiting, these 10 ladies in waiting fell asleep. It was midnight, actually, before they were wakened by these shouts of joy greeting the groom's much-delayed appearance. Fortunately, the 5 bridesmaids had prepared for just such a situation, and they'd come with oil in their lamps. They lit the lamps and they escorted the bridegroom into the banquet hall. Unfortunately, the other 5 had come unprepared, without oil in their lamps. And so they had to quickly leave to fetch fuel, but alas, on their return, they discovered the doors to the wedding party were closed. Well, that's a harsh story. What time was it for Matthew to write such a story? Well, it was after the crucifixion, certainly. It was during the Roman occupation, and by appropriation of grain and shekels, Matthew lived in the Galilee, the land of wheat, and it was impoverished. And the foreign ideas and the ways that had come in with Roman occupation made it, according to the religious leaders, a very unclean time. And so they were insisting returning to the purity laws, 500 or so purity laws. And in other words, that would translate, it's time to steer clear of Lucius, the Roman at the city gate. It's time to shun that beggar begging in the square on Sabbath. And it's certainly time to shut out all the strangers, including the Jesus followers, preaching love the enemy and feed the poor every day. So the empty lamp gals in Matthew's story, I would suggest that they are those leaders who, fearing change, had polluted the sacred teachings of hospitality and compassion that was their Jewish traditional texts. Now, those with oil in their lamps, I imagine Matthew understood as his own community, those living out of a new story, and this new story was moving across the Mediterranean, you'd say, like wildfire. In Colossae, for example, they wrote from that community, the kingdom of God is among us. It's in between, with and through us, in welcoming the stranger and caring for the needy. And in Galatia, they wrote about their community. It was where male and female, it was where Jew and Gentile, slave and free, gathered together in brand new forms of religion, the house church. I mean, this is fascinating to me. This is alluring to me. Those end times were birthing new stories and new structures. So exciting to me that this Christian religion was born in times like these. So this is a story we usually tell in the church at the beginning of Advent, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. And so just a minute on this wonderful word, Advent. It comes from a word meaning coming, Adventus, Latin, the coming of a new time. And in some corners of Christianity, that's a time that calls for preparation in anticipation of Jesus' second coming in glory to judge the living and the dead. And let me be honest, this is something I take metaphorically. So I like to think of Advent as a time to polish our spiritual lives, to prepare ourselves to celebrate the birth on Christmas. It's a time churches, do mitten trees and food drives and any other acts that might emulate Jesus' life story of social justice. And commercially, we know what Advent means. All you have to do is go to a store right now and see the decorations and sales based on the story of materialism and consumerism that's based on the fossil fuel and the industrial society. So Advent's become a time of Black Friday sales and chocolate treats in our calendars as we wait for the big gifts. And that's the story. Even though we've heard of the planetary crisis, even though we know about it, it's a story that's still hard to reject. So it's time, folks. It is time to break through. It's a time to become all we can be. Now, we don't know what that's going to look like for the church, or maybe even for us as a society, or maybe even for us as a species. Think about it. When that embryo is in the egg right at the beginning, does it ever imagine it's going to be a chicken or a rooster? We can't imagine it, but there does come a time when we need to break through and become what it is we are created to be. One of my teachers, a green nun, and I'll say a bit more about that in a bit, she had this to say about these times of breaking through, times of becoming for us as a species, as a Christian culture. Though we're nurtured within the boundaries of our culture's beliefs, the Holy, the Spirit must always be welcomed to break through those shells, lest we die imprisoned in a story too small. Isn't that wonderful? Though we've been nurtured within the boundaries of our culture's beliefs, the Holy, the Spirit must always be welcome to break through those shells, lest we die imprisoned in a story too small. I learned this from Miriam McGillis at Genesis Farm in New Jersey, a green nun. And I'm here to tell you that one of the most exciting things for me is that there are so many green nuns across North America and actually around the world who believe that their work today is teaching earth literacy, is teaching a new cosmology, a new story, and that the divine presence is in and through all that. And so they run these ecology centers. And I'm excited by watching this because I see, wow, here's Christianity responding to these new times by living out of a new story in a new form and using a new language. Well, that new story I discovered, much to my surprises, from science. One of the things I didn't realize in the church was that in the centuries past, there has been an animosity between science and Christianity. That's got a whole great story to it. What we're seeing in our times, this coming together of science and religion. And if you Google it, science and religion, you'll be flooded with the fact of how these new communities are shaping up. The other thing that surprised me greatly about the story from science, one, it's a 13.8 billion year story. You can take a breath and just, that can't even sink in. 13.8 billion year story. And that our 2,000-year-old Christian story is a very recent part of that larger story then. And so who am I to say that the divine isn't in and through all that? So, in my words, here's a story from science, and I call it The Adventure, remembering Adventus. I will become, I am becoming, but not having any idea actually what actually it was becoming. All that Adventus, the holy creativity, could imagine was, well, I will become more. And so it was, on fire with this infinite potential, allured to becoming more, creativity danced, not too fast, not too slow, into something more. Particles of matter, quarks, neutrons, protons, hydrogen, carbon, until it had become universe, the size of a grapefruit. In less than 250 million years, creativity had become something more, galaxies, and then masses of itself as stars. And so it went, stretching and reaching and becoming for billions of years. Until one day, about 4.5 billion years ago, Wednesday, I think it was, on a planet not too big and not too small, creativity became bacteria. Now, bacteria was creativity on steroids. This was full of infinite energy, adapting, morphing, evolving in the depths of the ocean world that was neither too hot or too cold. Becoming a single-celled amoeba one day, fish with a backbone centuries later, one day dancing with the winds as dragonfly, the next knowing the emotion of love as a chimpanzee. Creativity, you see, was adventurous. And one day, only a few million years ago, creativity became Homo genus adventus, the hunter of food, the carrier of fire, a tool maker, thinker maker, the one who is always becoming more. And so it was. Adventus learned to cook and dreamed of the day it would have its own cooking show. Is there wisdom in these stories from science for us? Can we call the wisdom teachings from science a sacred story? It's not a better story. It's just another story, explained my teacher, who was both a scientist and a Christian and aware that every religious tradition had its own creation story. So the question is, does ecology and cosmology, the study of this magnificent universe that we are expressions of, does it offer us modern parables, revelations for these times? I wonder what Matthew would interpret from the new story. Maybe he would say that the end times are becoming times, that the divine creativity is always becoming something more, that there's no closed doors in this story. There are no limits on who or even what is holy. The science says to me that everything is seamless. The past, the present, the future. Earth, life, plant, animal, human life. It's all part of a sacred marriage. And divinity? It is the seamlessness. That's what a cosmologist, a scientist, a Christian, Brian Swim, says as he writes about the universe. He calls seamlessness the divine intelligence. So I wonder what Thomas Berry, that father of the new story, might say. He might say that it makes Advent less about waiting for and preparing for God or industry or technology or government or whatever comes first to solve the climate crisis. It's more about everyone and everything being understood and understanding themselves as a vessel through which this divine creativity is working. In our choices, even at the grocery store, in our work, if we advocate for a more sustainable way of working or producing something, in our beliefs, in our prayers. This creativity is breaking into these times, making them an adventure of becoming more. What did you say, Christina? Where's Jesus in the story? I have a feeling that if we were to ask Avery or any of those youth marching at COP26 or Greta Thunberg, they might say Jesus is one of those magnificent homogeneous Adventists, those Homo sapiens showing us what more we can become. And what time is it for our species, for you and me and for the church, for Wesley? We all have to answer that question for ourselves according to our allurements. And those allurements may come in images, longings, relationships that draw us to become more involved, creative, prayerful, self-giving as we go back out today. For me, it's a time to come back and to share my story with my spiritual family. And to tell you that what I've seen is that the traditional ways of being are giving way to new shapes and new forms. The order of the sacred earth, for example. This was started by a young man in my class at University of Creation Spirituality, and now it's a worldwide virtual organization. And the only vow that they ask their followers, their participants to make is to be the best lover of the earth they can be. And then there are wilding churches out there, churches, congregations that meet outdoors and go for a walk and feel. Less words, more feeling, more attunement with the seasons. more empathy, following the wisdom of resting more, letting go more in the fall as it moves into winter, more energy in the spring. And these wilding churches, and many who aren't part of churches at all, I've come to new beliefs. The beliefs that the earth, that you and I, were all made of the very stuff born in the death of stars. And we're coming home in these times to ourselves, a new understanding of what we are. So come with me back now to the rural congregation in Kinmount, Ontario, where I first came back. And finding myself in what I call now an evolutionary experiment, an experiment in our evolving. And in that church, where the average age was 78 perhaps, I saw them design and host cosmic summer camps. There was no illusion that they were looking to build up their Sunday school, to save their church, to create a future for themselves. I heard the leader say to the parents, "We're not doing this for ourselves. We're not doing this for you to come to bring your children to church. We don't have a Sunday school anymore. We're doing this because we love children and we want for their future. And we're giving them a story along with ours to help them." And so this has all brought me home into communion, to say the Christian and the scientific stories, as I've watched them, studied them, lived them, are together stronger. They're strengthening us, I think, to address a crisis such as we've never seen, not individuals and not our human species before. The evolutionary story, absolutely, it's a new story, but it's an invitation into an adventure to become something more than we've never imagined before. The Jesus story tells me there is a possibility of becoming what I've never imagined before, what we maybe have never imagined before. Perhaps we can now become equal to our Christ potential, equal to loving the earth community as ourselves, trusting these times are inviting us to becoming. May it be so.
Next week, we're going to spend a lot more attention on this. I invite us into prayer. Creator, created, and creating Spirit, we give you thanks. We give you thanks for the sun that warms our days and lights our ways. And we give you thanks for the moon and the stars. We give you thanks for the feathered, winged ones, the swimming, finned ones. We give you thanks for the waters, the vast seas and oceans, and the babbling brooks. We give you thanks for all the beautiful wild flowers and the ones that you invite us to co-create with you, Creator, in gardens of bright colors. We give you thanks for the four-legged. We give you thanks for the four-legged friends we call pussycats and puppy dogs. We give you thanks for our two-legged friends, the ones we call family, the ones with whom we share our living. We give you thanks, O God, for helping us understand that we are all one, that together we reside in this creation, and you spur us to understand you through it. Help us see you, O God, and feel you and taste you and touch you in and through creation. And we give you thanks for the stories of all of creation, of their becoming and their becoming more. We give you thanks for the wisdom that you give us through these stories. And we ask, O God, that you bless us, that we do not deny the wisdom that you live and breathe through all of creation, that we do not turn ourselves away from the wisdom that you long for us to know. We ask, O God, for the strength, the courage, the creativity to listen to the wisdom of the leaders who come from Glasgow, who have gathered from around this earth together. Help us live into this new story, O God. This story at its beginning, this newness of which we do not know the end. We ask, O God, for you to bless all of those who struggle in these times. We ask for you to bless this earth and its resilience. We ask, O God, for you to bless those whom we know who are struggling, who are ill of body or of mind, who are in grief, who face challenges that are seemingly beyond their capacity. Grant them peace, O God. Help them to walk into that newness with the confidence that you will walk with them. All this we pray in the name of the one who walks with us, Jesus our Christ, who taught us to pray with these words. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial, and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, Let us sing, "Oh Beautiful Guy," our closing hymn. Oh, beautiful Gaia, oh, Gaia, calling us home. Oh, beautiful Gaia, calling us on. Soil yielding its harvest, oh, Gaia, calling us home. Soil yielding its harvest, calling us on. Waves crashing on granite, oh, Gaia, calling us home. Waves crashing on granite, calling us on. Pine bending in windstorm, oh, Gaia, calling us home. Pine bending in windstorm, calling us on. Loon resting in marshland, oh, Gaia, calling us home. Loon resting in marshland, calling us on. Oh, beautiful Gaia, oh, Gaia, calling us home. Oh, beautiful Gaia, calling us on. Carol, would you like to share a benediction and commissioning with us? Okay.
Stand, sit, wherever you're comfortable to do, but go from here with the sure and very certain awareness that like the horizon, God is before us, that like the bedrock beneath us, Christ is our sure foundation, and like the water in a pitcher and in the pouring out of us, the Spirit is within us and in the pouring out of us. Amen.
Amen. Postlude, please.
May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rain fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face.
I think someone has something to say to you. If she can say it. And none of us heard that. But you know what? Did you not hear with your bodies? Did you not hear with your eyes the sentiments with which she shared to Brienne? Brienne, did you want to say anything? If you're going to do that, you need to use a microphone.
Yeah, so I had to like completely disassociate from my body there. Otherwise, I knew that I would not be able to get by. See, if I just played piano and didn't sing, then it would be fine. Because I can cry while playing piano, but I can't cry and sing.
I'll start again so they all can hear me then.
I said to Brienne that we will miss her, the Calvin, the kids, her beautiful voice, beautiful music. However, we wish her all the best in this new exciting opportunity at St. Andrews, which I know you're looking forward to. It's bittersweet, but we will miss you extremely for the past 8 years of beautiful music.
Thank you. Yeah, Thank you. It has been, to say it's been a privilege to serve this community of faith is the biggest understatement. As you all know, this obviously was not an easy decision for me, and I'm really feeling all the feelings right now. I've kind of just been disassociating this whole past week, not trying to think about leaving you. And I understand that it's not goodbye forever, it's just see you later. But it has been truly one of the biggest honors of my life to serve this community over the past 8 years. It really has. I have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed getting to know you all and making the connections. I did not think I was going to cry this much. I would have not worn makeup then. I want to thank you for being such a lovely, supportive congregation, and I hope that throughout these past 8 years, my music has touched you and brought you closer to God and closer to your faith, because that's the whole point of this. And I'm excited to embark on this new journey, but I'm also very, very sad to leave this beautiful community. So I hope that whatever comes next for Wesley, that God walks with you and he walks beside you. Thank you.
So there's cake. Oh, there's more? Okay. Again, if you're going to speak, great plan to use the microphone.
Good morning. This is a special thank you from the choir, who Brian's taught us so much in those 8 years of how to sing and do crazy exercises and just expanded our knowledge, and we wish her all the best and thank her.
And there's cake. So they have prepared